So the first person I'm going to invite on is my bro, Zach Gallion. He is an amazing man of God. Actually just got married late last year, so he's a newlywed. He's figuring that out, so I'm excited to have his perspective. And then my brother, Matt, probably the only person besides my mama and my daddy who I've known for their whole life. So I'm excited to invite them on. Hey, what's up, bro?
And how's it going?
I'm good. Matt,
Yo,
what's up, man?
what's
What's
popping?
up,
What's popping?
Nothing much, fellas. Thank y'all so much for joining me. Like, I really appreciate it.
man? Yeah, man. Glad to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So let me do this because some people obviously don't know. My little bro, Seth Join. What's up, bro? Urban counselor, what's up? So
What's
let's
up?
do this. A lot of people may not know who y'all are. So if y'all could just give like a brief little introduction about who you are, if you're married, whatever, and then we'll get started in some questions. We actually have some questions from fellas that follow us. So some people actually submitted some questions, so we'll definitely make sure we answer those, and then we'll see where it goes. But Zach, you go ahead first. Introduce yourself.
What's up, y'all? My name is Zach. I am married, as Tim said. I got married this past December to my beautiful wife, Lola.
Hey,
I have known my wife since we were 11. We have not dated that whole time. I've been saved since 2014, I think it was. I'm from, and that's all I got for you.
that's what's up. Wait, how long did you and your wife date? For the people watching.
We dated for before we got married. Before we got engaged was 6 months. Before we
Okay.
got another 9 months.
So 6 months, that's low to depending on who you ask. Because in Christian circles, that's either quick or that's super long. You never know. It varies so much.
I think it varies on the couple, right? For us, it felt like at times it was quick, but honestly, I think 3 months in, we felt like we had been together for a couple of years. So it really
Yeah.
depends on your intentionality in your relationship.
Yeah, that's a good point. But Matt, let me have you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, what's up, everyone? Like you said, my name is Matt. I am not married. I obviously know Timmy's my brother. We're 2 years apart. Great guy. I'm glad to be here. I'm definitely honored to share anything from the singles perspective because I know we got a lot of single guys on here right now.
Now, is you single or is you single? There's a difference.
That's fine.
Yeah, that's funny. Single.
Single. Okay. It's for men only, so I'm not really helping you out. But just so the fellas know what perspective you're coming from tonight. Well, thank y'all so much. I'm going to jump right into just some questions I have. I'm not really going to, the goal is for me not to talk too much. I want to hear y'all perspective. I could have went live by myself if I just wanted to share what I got to say, but I would love to hear y'all. So the first thing I'll say is this. Did you have any examples growing up of what a godly man looked like? Because I feel like for a lot of men, there can be a struggle when we feel like we haven't really seen what it looks like to be a godly man, and we don't really know how to do it, especially if you first getting saved. Anybody can go.
Yeah. So I am also a product of divorce. My parents got split when I was like 2 years old. And both of my parents ended up getting remarried to other people. And my dad, in terms of just a godly man, was absolutely godly, but didn't get the chance to be around him as often as you would like if he was in the house. I think as I got older, and especially as I joined Union Church, got to see a lot of great examples of like godly men, but that was much later in life, so I had a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah. What about you, Zach?
So I did not grow up around any godly men or women. I polar opposite in a lot of ways, but it wasn't really until late school, college age that I really got the opportunity to be around godly community.
Do you feel like for both of you guys, do you feel like not seeing a godly man, especially for you, Zach, did that hurt you once you were actually, gave your life to Christ and was a man? Or how do you feel like that affected you?
I will say that I felt like I was running wild and free with my faith, right? And so I think there's definitely a benefit to having godly counsel, right? Especially as a new believer. And so I would say that I missed out on some opportunities to just be matured and be refined. And I think that it took a lot of catching up to get to that point, but it was possible. And that was, I think that was my biggest mark, is that like, okay, like I see where I'm at, I see the marks I'm not hitting. How do I get to this point where I feel comfortable in my walk with God? And what intentionality do I need to have to get to that point?
Yeah. That's real. Matt, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I just think like you don't know that you're missing the mark, until you actually see the target, right? So I think when you look around and everyone that you're looking at is not a godly man or not living for God or whatever, or not advanced in years to the point where you can like look up to them in that sense, you don't really know what you're missing out on. I think when I finally got around some godly men that were, ahead of me, that, either were married or had kids or whatever that was, especially as I got to spend more time with my dad and just other people in the church, I realized like I had a lot of growing to do, and I think it was definitely very fruitful for me. But I think for a lot of people, like you don't realize that you're missing out on that until you actually see it.
This guy Matt about to have us pass the collection plate. This man said, he said, you don't know you missed the mark till you realize you got to see the real target. I just jacked that up. I don't even know what you said. Sheesh. Bro, that's good. So I've heard it said from a pastor, y'all know who he is, Dr. Darius Daniels, but he argues that godly friendships are even more important than mentors, because a lot of times people are not going to be their real self around their mentor unless they're super comfortable. But with your friends, like you're normally yourself. You're not faking, you're being real. So what has that been like, whether it was when you first got saved or just now as a man? Like, how have friendships shaped you?
Yeah, I can 100% say I would not be the man that I am without like the godly friends that I have. In this season and in past seasons, just other godly bros to be able to challenge me, to be able to see the parts of me that were not perfect, that were not great, and to be able to be like, hey, like, let's get that up off of there. I think for me, like really not even submitting myself to, but being vulnerable and with people, being able to be open about like the areas where I'm just not great or excellent, whatever it is, and being able to receive love and support back in those areas. That was honestly one of the biggest things for me, because I think without that, you feel like you're doing it alone. And I think like with a mentor, like obviously like it's absolutely great because you're learning from someone who has already been there and done that. But when you're walking with someone who's walking there right there with you, but you both are still looking to go in the same direction, it's a completely different game because you can hold each other up essentially.
Yeah. Now, Zach, before you answer, I've seen this stereotype before in culture where it's like Christian men are whack. And y'all may see this with Russell Wilson. He gets a lot of flack, whether it's justified or not, because a lot of people know he's godly. But, what is your perspective on that? When you first got saved, like, did you feel that way? Did you feel like, Christian men suck, or they're whack, or they're not real, or what were your thoughts?
I would say there was a level of cheesiness to Christian men. But I think what I mistake as cheesiness was really just a heart on fire for God.
You better talk, bro.
Yeah. It seems like, you're just doing this for attention. And then once I really got into my walk with God, it was like, oh no, this man is praising like without remorse, right? And it's not, he's literally calling on God into this moment. And so it's not an attention thing for man, it's an attention thing for God of I see you, God, I'm honoring you, God, you're a worthy God. And so for me, there, like I said, it was cheesiness at first, but I think the further and I got in, and I think this is where I could kind of agree with Dr. Darius Daniels, is I think that having friendships and brothers who were walking on that same path in the similar season, some a couple steps ahead, some a couple steps behind, maybe some at the same steps, really benefited because like you said, it's real, right? You know, we're talking on Friday night of like, okay, what should we be doing right now, or what are we doing right now, or maybe it's where is our mind at right now? When I got saved, I was 20, 21. So you can imagine 2021, previously not saved, what was going on a typical Friday night. So it was huge for me to have that community, to be able to say like, hey, I know you have this invitation right here, but why don't you just come kick it with us and just be in the space, right? No expectations. We're not doing anything. We're just chilling.
Yeah, no, that's so good. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was gonna say that's so good. Like, I think there is a level. There are some Christians who are corny. Like that just.
Facts.
There's some people who ain't Christians who's corny. So that is what it is. But I think when you stereotype that all Christian men are corny or whack, like that's just not true. And I think what you said is what the truth is a lot of times, is that people mistake what cool looks like in culture, and they think that's exactly what cool should look like in the church. Absolutely. When a lot of times culture and the church are going to contradict. So that doesn't really match. That doesn't mean you can't be cool. That doesn't mean you can't be fly. That doesn't mean you can't make money. But you can't be looking at culture to be the standard for what a man should be if you're trying to be a godly man. So that's really good.
And I feel like if your church looks exactly like what cool looks like on the outside, check your church.
Yeah, nah, that's real. So let me get into some questions from people that actually submitted to us. So I asked everybody that follows Just Dating, like, hey, what questions do you have? So we're going to ask some of those. Let's just get it spicy off the jump. Somebody said, can we kiss and still keep it holy? I'm going to let y'all answer that.
Man, why you setting us up like this, man?
Let's go. Hey, we said this is going to be a real raw conversation about being a man, so let's go.
I love it. I love it. I think for me, it's... And
let me clarify for people. This is specifically when you're dating. Like, if you're dating somebody, if you're talking to somebody, obviously not when you're married, but just for clarity.
Right. Yeah. I think for me, you gotta know yourself, you know. You gotta know yourself. You gotta know what's gonna push you over the edge. Pastor Stephen Chandler has a saying that he's always talking about the highway of holiness. And essentially, if you're trying to live your life and thinking, okay, like what's the most that I can do without sinning, like you're already too close to that line. So I know for me, I know myself. And while I'm single right now, when I do date, I definitely plan on that really being something that's like a boundary for me, just because of the fact that I know that obviously there's different levels, right? Like a peck is one thing, and then, you know, like you staying vertical, and then all of a sudden you lean against the car or whatever it is, you know, like you got to know like what works for you. And I think it's definitely comes down to like the individual, but I don't know if there is any overall answer. Like there's some couples who kiss while they're dating, courting, and they do that successfully. So I don't think it's like if you do this, like it's wrong. I think it's more so of a knowing yourself thing.
Yeah. Now, Zach, you actually just finished dating, not too long ago. So you can answer this from some real recent experience.
Yeah. It's real. That's right. I mean, you got to know yourself. You have to know, like you both have to talk. You have to communicate about like, hey, what is this doing for us? Right? Is this helping us or hurting us? For us, we said no, we can't do it. And I think we misstep or missay of what that means. We have to understand, it does not mean that we don't want to. It's saying, hey, that's the first step down the slippery slope to anything and everything, right? So if we are keeping God at the center of this relationship, and then eventually to this marriage, whatever God has for us in marriage, right? Like whatever God's plan is for us, we want to keep that sacred and keep that that faith with God, so that when we get to that point of marriage, He blesses that, right? So I would say general population, don't do it. But
you said something so good. Let me just pause right here. So you said, as Christians, we got to realize that just because we're not doing something doesn't mean we don't want to. Because I think sometimes, and this goes into knowing yourself, like sometimes we think, well, it's not a sin or it is a sin or whatever. So that means I shouldn't want to do it. And like, that's just, we have flesh. So like, yeah, I mean, a lot of dudes, they want to have sex with their girlfriend before they get married, but that doesn't mean they're going to. And that's the whole part of growing as a man, to me, as a Christian, is learning how to submit your will to God's will. If you think about Jesus, before he gave his life, he was like, look, Lord, if you can take this cup of supper from me, like, I ain't trying to die on the cross. Like, if you can take this, but nonetheless, not my will, Lord, your will. And I think that's so good, Zach, because a lot of times as Christians, we act like just because we want to do it, that makes it right, or we shouldn't do it. But sometimes you want to do it, but you still say no because you want to submit to Christ. That's really good. Were you going to say something?
No.
Yeah, and I'll just say I agree with y'all. Like, I definitely think you need to know yourself. And just fellas watching, boundaries in general. When you're dating, you need to know yourself. It's not even little things. And this is where I think we get in trouble as Christians, is I think people start looking at it like, oh, there's too many rules. But again, it goes back to knowing yourself. So for me, right, I knew that when me and Pauline were dating, I couldn't just be rubbing on her, or she couldn't just be rubbing on me, even if that's not a sin, right? Like, even if we look in the Bible and we don't see like that's a sin, I knew for me that was going to take my mind places I don't want to go. Because I think we forget this verse where God talks about if you even look at a woman lustfully, you're sinning. Now, that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean you're an evil person if you have a bad day and you look at somebody. Like, that's not what we're saying. There's no condemnation in Christ. But I think understanding that, yo, this is my struggle. Like, some dudes on here, you need to practice this habit. And I do this, and then I'll let y'all jump in. But, you know, some dudes, we grew up like this. In school, you're walking down the hallway, and your man's like, oh, snap. And that neck, you know, that neck turn, and you see something, you looking at something you shouldn't be. Now, how do we think we can do that for 20 plus years, 30 plus years before we get saved? And then a part of that's still not going to affect us now as Christian men. And I think we got to be honest. Like, yes, my flesh does want to look at women sometimes inappropriately. But me, as a new creation submitted to Christ, I'm not going to. And you have to set yourself up practically. So, for example, if you're driving and you see a woman jogging on the streets, you need to just look the other way. Because you know your flesh wants to look. I think sometimes we miss the practical stuff. Do y'all have anything y'all can add to that? Because I started rapping and preaching.
So I actually used to struggle with that. And I came up with something for myself that was beneficial to help me intentionally distract myself. So what I did is I told myself, okay, what is something I carry with me every day, or I have with me every day, or that I can look at every day? And happens, that's what I'm going to think about. That's what I'm going to look at. For me, there's a scar right here on my right hand that I cut when I was working on a farm back when, right? And so literally I would look at that scar and just like think about that story. And then it takes my mind off that. And then I don't even remember what I was tempted to look at before. But and I'm not saying do that, but I think just the intentionality to want to stop doing that is what you have to start with. You have to start with the desire to say, okay, I'm done doing this. I don't want to do this anymore. How do I fix this? And then you move from there.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good.
Yeah. I think growing up, like you said, like we essentially allow ourselves to be submitted to our flesh. And I think when you give your life to Christ, you're choosing to say, I'm going to submit my life to him. So you're taking that step from flesh to spirit. And I think when you take that step, like you choose to turn from sin, but if you don't close the door, that sin is just going to continue to try to follow you into your walk with Christ. And I think the practical steps in doing that is understanding, like the verse that you talked about, like looking at a woman lustfully. It's like, okay, well, I can't look anymore, you know. And our dad always gave the example of, you know, like that first look sometimes is an accident. You know, you didn't mean that first look, but if you stalk it, if you got a second look, like you know that you're heading in the wrong direction. And I think you have to take the practical steps of thinking like, okay, like I'm no longer submitting to my flesh. I'm going to submit to the spirit. What does that look like for me? Like, what are the things that I habitually do, and what are the things that I need to let go of in order to continue on this walk? So I think that's so important when you're thinking about dating, because if you walk that life from flesh into a relationship with God, you very well can walk that life into from singleness to dating. So you need to handle that. Like in your singleness is the perfect opportunity to do that before you get into that dating situation. And in dating, there's things that you're going to have to let go before you get married.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think for men on here that aren't dating at all, you can have your ideas of what you think you will be able to do and what you aren't going to do when you start dating, but you never know until you're really in it. So just because you think you're going to be able to do something doesn't mean when you start dating you will. So it's okay for you to have your boundaries change when you start dating. Like just because you think right now that you're going to kiss or do whatever when you start dating doesn't mean you have to do that once you get in it, because there's a whole new level of temptation. That's like a guy being like, man, I would never cheat on my wife. But you ugly. Nobody really checking for you. Like you don't got a chance. But if you got 10 women that walk up to you, then we'll see what you're really about. So I think we just gotta be realistic in that sense too. Now, I got another question from somebody that follows us. They asked, when it comes time, and Zach, obviously you'll probably be able to speak to this. When it comes time for the proposal, is it wise to talk to the girl's parents while she is there? I'm guessing she means like she right in the room. You ask her dad.
So I think first and foremost, I'm going to assume it to this point, y'all have had a conversation about marriage. You've had a conversation about it. What you should have had a conversation about, okay, like generally speaking, what do you want this proposal to be? Because you want to know if she's expecting this grand thing or if she wants something quiet and intimate. That being said, personally speaking, I wouldn't suggest it because the proposal is generally speaking a surprise in the moment. My wife knew that I was going to eventually talk to her parents, but she didn't know when I was meeting with her parents. So again, it really depends couple to couple, but I wouldn't personally do it.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I think what you said is so true. And y'all have to, those listening, please apply this for every area of your relationship. If it's not a principle from God, then you got to realize that every relationship tip you get, you're going to have to filter it through the person you're dating or married to one day. Because just because something works for me and Pauline doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Just because something works for Zach and his wife doesn't mean it's going to work for you. You got to figure out, okay, what is this person going to like? Because I'm sure there's some women that they want to know, when are you talking to my dad? Now, and that's okay. That's not a sinful for her to know that you're doing it. It's just, is that what's going to serve her best? And are you okay with that? If you got a problem with it, then y'all got to learn to talk it out. I think sometimes we're scared to have real conversations with our partner because we don't want to have conflict. And you're going to have a lot of conflict when you get married. So you got to learn how to work that out for sure. So Matt, I got a question for you. Somebody asked, is there a specific guideline to obtain a mentor? If so, what are those guidelines?
Yeah. I don't know if I would say that there's a specific guideline. I think you just have to know what areas in your own personal life are you looking to grow. If you're looking to grow spiritually, if you're looking to grow financially, if you're looking to grow emotionally, like having emotional health, like you may not find one person that has all of those different skill sets, to a T. So I think thinking about like, okay, like what are the few areas that I want to grow in and who are the people that I see currently in my life that are displaying fruit in those areas. So if I know someone who is super good with money, but they're terrible in another area, like I'm not gonna necessarily go to them in that other area, but absolutely I'm gonna ask them, okay, like what's your financial goals? Like what does this look like? All the different type of stuff. So I think sometimes we want like this one person who is going to answer every single question, and we want this one magical person that's going to be able to, speak into our life and always be able to give us the best advice in every area. That's the Holy Spirit. And I think you really have to understand that we as humans are not the Holy Spirit. So while it's always definitely important to seek counsel, like the Bible talks a lot about, there's wisdom in counsel. But I think you also have to understand that it's more so to confirm what it is that God is trying to speak to you, than trying to like, okay, like I'm just going to go to this person and have them tell me what to do. But really understanding that like, yes, I need to go find wisdom. And that's in part, that's like going to this in person and saying, like, okay, like, what are some things that you've done when you were up against this sort of situation? But knowing that it's not always going to be like one person that can speak to every single area of your life.
Boy, that collection plate, that joint coming. I'll tell you. What's your Cash App? What's your Cash App, man? Guys?
Hey, chill. Matt S. Wheeler.
Zach, you got anything to add to that?
No, I think it's good. I think we put too much pressure on mentors. I think Matt's right. We need, as people, is coming from the Holy Spirit. And I think that there needs to be a desire and a hunger for the Holy Spirit more in your life. But having mentors is good. I mean, I think one of the first things I did when I came to my church was like, okay, I need a mentor. And I think this goes back to our earlier conversation of godly counsel at a young age. For me personally, I needed somebody to bridle my, like, here's the filter, right? This is what you need to focus on. And almost as a father figure in a way, like a spiritual father figure. And so for me, that's important to have. But again, general things, not specific in everything. And I go to the Holy Spirit for authority, but I go to this person for suggestions. And I think that's a big underlying fact that we need to remember, that they're not Jesus.
Yeah.
That's just,
and I think that's really good, Zach. And I think that we forget as Christians, at least I did, let me speak for myself. When I was growing up, I was so pressed to find a mentor when I first got saved. I was like, I got to find a mentor because that's the only way for me to grow. And I think we forget that the Bible says that no good thing will the Lord withhold from you. So if having a mentor is good for me and I'm praying, Lord, please send me one, the Lord will bring it in time. I just have to be patient. Like, I think sometimes as Christians, we rush things and we're not doing other things to help us as we're waiting for God to send us whatever we're believing for. So if you're looking for a mentor, are you reading any books right now? Are you listening to any podcasts? Like, there's no excuse to get the wisdom you need because there's so much available for us. And I think sometimes we got to be willing to take that first step, and then God will send what we need on the back end. I think also we forget it's okay to just ask a question. Like, somebody doesn't have to have the mentor title in our life. Like, if you're plugged into a church, you can just go up to a man in there and be like, hey, I got a question about this. Most guys are going to answer your question. Like, they're not just going to leave you hanging. Now, unless it's some super deep question, then maybe they may say, hey, we got to talk about this another time. But you really do need to be willing to just ask questions. Like, I think we miss out on that for sure.
Yeah. So I think it's... Oh, go ahead, Zach.
I was just saying, it ain't that deep sometimes. Sometimes you just got one question you got to get out there, and then you don't need necessarily that relationship for that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Matt, was you going to say something?
Yeah, I think beyond, like, so we talked about, like, finding a person that has fruit in that area. I think it's also finding someone who has grace for you and that area of life. So I think, like, there's people who have a lot of wisdom in an area, but they aren't necessarily gifted to be able to speak into your life in a way that's going to be able to help you bear fruit. So I think you also have to be wise of that and understand that just because a person is doing well doesn't necessarily mean that they're at a place in their life where they can help others also do well. I think you want to go to people that want to help you, want to see you win. You know, I mean, obviously that takes relationship building. So it starts off with a question, and maybe you go to them, you know, with one question, and then you have a good conversation, and then you realize, okay, I want to start asking this person more questions in that area. But let it develop, let it grow. It doesn't have to be like, oh, will you be my mentor? Like, what's your name again? Like, it doesn't have to be like that.
Yeah. Another thing is, if you want a mentor and you ask somebody for advice, you need to do what they say. Like, why are you going to ask somebody for their advice and then not do it? If this is somebody that you truly trust and respect, and what they're telling you to do isn't anything ungodly, like, I think we think that we can ask people their advice, not do it, and then keep coming back to them and expect them to want to pour into us.
Yeah.
Now, mentors want to see a return on their investment. Like, if they say something to you, they want to see that you did something with it. So I think we forget about that. But let me transition to another question. So a lot of times men, they say, I'm not really ready to get married because I'm not where I want to be financially. And, you know, we could get into that. But how much money do you think you need, or how much money do you think you should make before you get married? Do you think there's a number? Or just what are your thoughts on that whole thought process?
So, two things. Number one, it depends on the kind of wedding you want, right? Some people just want to go to the courthouse and get that done, get that taken care of, and move forward with their life. Other people want this big, extravagant wedding, and there's other people want the middle ground. I will say for us, we had nothing saved when we got engaged. I mean, $0 saved for our wedding. And what I will say is we submitted our relationship, our marriage, this engagement series. We submitted it all to God and say, you're going to work with us here because you called us to this. But what it took for us was work. And on top of the work, we had to do a little bit of extra work. And so it was a grind season for us, but we paid our entire wedding off in cash. And it was not, I mean, y'all were there. It was not a small, like low-key wedding, right? So God is going to provide everything that you need. So I think the answer, or the question really should be, is if we're called to this, are we willing to do what it takes to get where we want to go? And I think that's the biggest important thing, because you got to remember, this is the first project y'all are doing together as a team, and it can get a little stressful sometimes, a little ghetto, you know what I mean? But to be honest, like it for us, like I think just the intentionality of going back to and saying, okay, we're doing this not just for us, but with God at the center of it. So we know, and there are times where we had no idea. I mean, I'm talking about like 2 months, 3 months away from the wedding, and we're like, how are we going to pay for this? And just submitting it to God, being faithful. I mean, I remember my wife's dad looked at me a couple months before the wedding. In his living room, looks at me dead in the eye and goes, how are you going to pay for this wedding? And I looked him dead in the eye. I said, faith. I was like, and that's all I had. I said faith, and that was it. And he literally scoffed. And then God came through, and it was just, it was unbelievable. But I'm going to tell you, in that moment, I didn't know we were going to make it. I just had to believe.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think so many men get tripped up on this point, and I understand it, right? As a man, we're supposed to provide, we're supposed to, be there financially for our family. But I think sometimes we forget about God. And I think sometimes we forget that as Christians, there is an aspect of faith. Like the Bible literally says it's impossible to please God without faith. And we're not saying be reckless with your money and don't save and don't have a plan. But I think if you're literally at the place where you're like, I can't get married because of money, and a lot of times when people say that, they make good money. Mm-hmm. They just don't make enough money to live the extravagant social media lifestyle.
Or they too much money that they make.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where we get caught up, especially in this Google generation that we're in. We're so used to getting quick results. We're so quick to having answers to everything that when we don't think we have enough money, we think, okay, well, clearly I can't get married. When it's like, no, like you do serve a God who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. You serve a God who the whole world is his. Like, why would he not provide? He says that he'll provide everything that we need. So right. I think that's something we forget. And I shared this week on the W podcast that when I proposed to Pauline, I was making $32,000 a year. Like, that's not a lot of money. That's not a lot of money. I was making $32K, and somebody could look at me and be like, yo, that was irresponsible. Why are you proposing right now? But when I tell you that God is so faithful and that he provides, because God wants us to get married. Like if we're dating, he doesn't want us dating for 10 years. Like that's just not even practical. So I think it was cool to see God move. I got like 2 promotions before I got married. Pauline got a promotion right before we got married. So God always provides. And I was in the same situation as you, Zach. We paid for our wedding fully cash. But literally the day of the wedding, we still had some bills. But guess what? We had some people come in.
Yeah.
We got a little spray. And then we got the money. And we had some left over.
We literally, there was the money that we got sprayed with, we ended up paying somebody else with that money. Like it came down to the wire. But at the end of it, debt-free, right? And I think that's an important thing to remember is that, like, look, it was questionable when we made it. How long were y'all engaged for?
11 months. Yeah. So we were engaged for a little while. So that's another thing. If you know you need some money, you can make your engagement a little bit longer to give you a realistic runway. You may not be able to get married in 3 months, but in 9 months you could. I think that's something you got to sit down with your partner too and be honest. Like, hey, how much money can we save to be able to get this? Raph asked a question. Can you have faith and still want to make more money before getting married? Is that necessarily a bad thing? I'll let y'all. Matt, you can answer that.
What was the question?
Can you have faith and still want to make more money before getting married? Is that necessarily a bad thing?
Can you have faith and still want to make more money? No, I don't see how that could be a bad thing. Faith, good. Having money, good. I think obviously like it comes down to what your heart is, right? You know, if you're saying like I want to have more money so that I can obviously provide for my needs, but also provide for the needs of those around me, then that's the right heart to have that God is going to be able to bless. But like I don't think it's at all in opposition of faith, you know.
Yeah, Zach.
I would agree. I think that the faith is more important than the money. I would definitely say that ultimately you have to remember that God's a provider and you are not. And I think that for some of us who are looking to make more money, we're trying to say, okay, how can I provide for my fiance in this time to make sure that she gets the wedding that she wants, or we get the wedding that we want? I think just going back to the heart position, right? It's just remembering that, like, hey, God is the provider ultimately. So if God's plan is for me to make more money, then my only thought about the money is making sure that I give it back to God correctly.
Yeah. No, that's good. And there's nothing, like you said, nothing wrong with making more money, nothing wrong with wanting that. Just make sure your heart is in the right place. So that's really good. That question I posed earlier was more about men who are paralyzed to make a move. So they'll date an extra year or two before they propose because they don't make a certain amount of money. But you got enough to make the next step, and God can meet you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Do it.
What do you say?
No, go ahead, bro. And do it. Like, if y'all know, then you just pull the trigger, right? If you've been praying about it, you've talked to God about it, and God is saying do it, trust him. And that's just as simple as it gets.
Yeah. Pauline asked the question, Zach, I would love to hear your thoughts. She said, how do you handle the pressure to provide as a man?
Ooh. What did I just do? My fault. How do you handle the pressure to provide as? So I was in kind of a weird situation because my wife didn't love being provided for. She's a very self-sustaining woman. She can do everything herself, and she's completely capable of doing that. We were just in a season where that wasn't the case. And I had no problem with it because that's just kind of who I am. But I think ultimately I had to really weigh myself and saying, okay, am I doing this to be a provider, to be who God's called me to be to my fiance, soon-to-be wife? Or am I doing this going extra and above to prove to her what I can do and being her provider instead of just trusting God with what she's asked me to provide for? You know what I mean? So, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing of like just understanding that you have to handle it with God and saying, look, God, I'm going to provide to what I can, but I need you to provide the rest, and I'm going to rely on you for the rest. And even when I'm going to provide, I'm still going to rely on you on.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think pressure comes down to perspective. So if my perspective is off about my role in the family, then of course I'm going to feel a bunch of pressure to provide. But when I remember that God is my provider first, and God is going to provide for my family, there really is no pressure. And also, I trust that the Lord is always going to make a way. So even if, God forbid, I didn't have a job, like I still trust that God is going to provide somehow. Like, you know, we heard about our pastor talk about it this past Sunday. Like, there's stories in the Bible where God was sending ravens, like birds, to feed people when there was a famine. So there really is no pressure if you really trust the Lord to provide. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't go out and do what you got to do as a man, but at the end of the day, your heart always has to be I'm just a vessel. God's using me, and God is using my job as a resource, but that is not the source of where our finances come from. So that was good. I'm gonna transition, and Matt, I would love to hear your perspective. We got probably about 15 more minutes on here. Matt, as a single man, how would you say that you're preparing for marriage, or are you preparing for marriage? Because I think there's this stigma in the church a lot of times that like men don't care about a lot of things. Like if you go to a church service, you see more women than you see men. If you go to relationship pages like mine, you see more women follow than men. Like there seems to be a disconnect in that way. So for you, what are you doing? Are you preparing at all? Or are you just like, hey, the numbers in my favor, when something comes, something comes. What is your process with that?
I mean, JDU, baby. That's what it's all about, man. Obviously everyone, or most people on this live are aware of We Are Just Dating, Just Dating University, and I think that's definitely a great tool. I'm fortunate enough to obviously, have relationship with y'all to the point where, I can reach out and ask questions and stuff. But I think for everyone, finding a married couple who, at least from your view, is doing life well, like you see that there's fruit coming from their relationship, like they at least look happy, whether they got some kids or, whatever the case is, they're just ahead of you in that area. And I think getting around them as much as possible, really seeing like what that looks like in terms of what a healthy marriage looks like, even outside of your own household. I think a lot of people that are fortunate to be able to have like both of their parents still together, I think you also have to want to take a step outside of that, just because like that's just everything that you're used to, everything that you're accustomed to. You don't want to take just one specific frame of marriage and like be like, this is what marriage has to look like. I think if you get yourself around a lot of different couples and really see like, okay, like, oh yeah, like they do this like this, like I'm gonna take this, or like, oh, they do that like that, I'm not gonna take that. I think really being able to see it and getting a vision for it, like, okay, like this is what it looks like, is one of the most important things you can do. And I think being able to have access to podcasts, have access to sermons on relationships. Like there's so much content out there to be able to learn more without even having to leave like the couch, So I think there's so many different things that you can do, that I do as a single person. I think that really most of those things, like if you want to grow in that area, if you don't want to just go in thinking like, hey, I'm good, like I got it, like you're going to take those steps. But obviously the main thing right now that I just started doing is JDU. So
yeah, I think one of the keys to having a healthy, godly relationship is being humble. I think a lot of times as men, or a lot of times as Christians, we think, oh, well, I read the Bible, like I know what I should be doing, I know how to have a healthy relationship. And you are not going to be able to do it by yourself. Like you need other people. Like there's some people that may look at Pauline and I and think we know we're talking about relationships, but we still need to be pursuing wisdom outside of whatever comes out of our mouth. Like we still need to be pursuing people that know what they're talking about, that can help us go to the next level in our relationship. And I think a lot of times people think, especially in dating, like I feel like for singles, it's easy to pursue wisdom, really, because a lot of singles are like, I want to find a man. Like, how do I find a man? Or how do I find a woman? Or am I ready to get married? But sometimes when we start dating, we kind of forget about the wisdom aspect of pursuing. And we're just so focused on this person and kissing and holding hands and having somebody to talk to on the phone and having somebody on a date with, that we forget, oh, we should be actually pursuing some wisdom on how to do this and make sure we're doing it well, and not just think we have it covered. So that's a good point. Yeah. Now, Zach, obviously you're a married man, so, and you're in your first year of marriage. How do you feel like learning how to have a healthy relationship has helped you in your first year? And share as much as you can, because obviously there's a stigma that the first year of marriage is really hard, and for some people it is, but I don't subscribe that it has to be.
Yeah, I would say that we definitely don't subscribe to that thought. I think that it's as hard as you make it, right? I think the whole thing first year of marriage is that we have to think about what the previous year looked like in their engagement, right? So were they prepping for the marriage or were they prepping for the wedding, right? I think that's a big portion of it, of like what are you doing to look into marriage? So big part of what Matt said, find a couple who's going to be real with you. I mean, literally tell you this is what marriage is like. It is beautiful most days.
Mm-hmm.
And some days it's not. But I mean, really, it's the preparation beforehand that comes for us. Man, I think just the amount of time that we put in praying for and being into not just our word, but in community. I think we didn't have JDU when we were dating, but we did Just Dating, the Connect group, right? And just the community we found in there, just being able to connect with people who are in similar seasons and just talk real with guys who are in the same position that I'm in, and really just have that iron sharpens iron kind of community right there. But man, like for us, it was all about the preparation, and man, it's good.
Zach, you said something good, and obviously, I helped create Just Dating University, so obviously I think it's great. But for you, as somebody who went through it, can you just share how you mentioned a little bit of it, but can you go into more detail about how it truly blessed your relationship? Because one, registration is still open until tomorrow for JDU. And it's not just about, oh, I want people to join just to make me feel good. Because like I already have my own relationship. But I truly believe that transformation can happen for people and that they can get so much out of it. So I would love for you to just share your experience.
Wow. Yeah. So we did, and it's really funny. So I was just new to the church, and my wife had said like, "Hey, let's join a connect group together." And I was like, "Cool. What are we gonna do?" She said, "A relationship one." I was like, "Pass. See ya." I didn't. But I'll tell you what, it is one of the most beneficial things we did for our relationship. I think that there in the church. There's just so many people um, who are in a similar season that you have no idea about. You see this person every Sunday, or throughout your week, and like their name, but you don't know their story. And so, man, we had some real talks in the Just Dating group. And I mean, when I say real talks, I mean like some of these guys, we got out of that group, and these dudes became my brothers. Like they became guys I talk to every single day, and they're guys who I do life with. And I think what was beneficial for us, the one was just be able to start the conversation, right? To be able to have the conversation with each other of like, okay, we talked about this in the group. How do we not just talk about it, but apply it to what we're moving forward to in our relationship, right? And I think being able to come back the next week and just talk about, okay, so hey, this is what was really great after that conversation, or this is what we could have done better, or just literally just saying that like, how do I lead in this next season? Like, what does that even look like? And just being able to talk to guys and to just chop it up and just say like, okay, like, well, I think this because of this in the Bible, or I think that because of this in the Bible, and just being able to walk through that season, it was massive for us, and it really got us caught up on like just knowing how to date at the core level of saying, okay, like this is what we need to be focused on, because we can do all the flashy dinners and dates and take the good pictures and everything, but that's not what's going to build our marriage. And I think that Just Dating was the foundation for us in our marriage, and our intentionality to be in that group and just be in that community and just pour in to that community in that group helped us grow, not just together, but also individually. And that ultimately just blossomed into some really, really great relationships and experiences.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Thank you for sharing that, bro. And I didn't pay him to say that. So I really do appreciate it. And there's so many people like you that have been able to go through the group. Like the fact that somebody you met in the Connect group is in your wedding.
Yeah.
Like that is
two or three of them actually.
That's crazy. And like you're not the only person who has that same story. So if you're interested, if you're on this call, if you're watching this on the replay, like, and you are dating, please consider joining Just Dating University. If the price is what's holding you back, please DM us. we will work with you, because this is more about life change and transformation than it is about making a quick buck. Like, we really do care. We have 5 years of experience that show we care about couples. We want to see couples do the best that they can. J Ariel, send us a DM. We will tell you all about Just Dating University, or you can just go to justdatinguniversity.com. But that's where you can get all the information. But thank you for sharing that, Zach. Yes, we have one. We have Just Dating University for singles, and we have Just Dating University for dating couples. We have 2 separate ones because there's 2 separate needs. And honestly, that was one of our passions, Zach and Matt, was when we were dating, we felt like the church was really good at focusing on singles, and when the church was really good at focusing on married people. But there was this gap for people that are dating where obviously you're not married, but you ain't single. Like, it's different. It's just a different perspective. And to me, it was so valuable to be surrounded by other godly dating couples who were doing it, and being able to know that I'm not alone in my struggles. I'm not alone in what I think about. I'm not alone in what I'm going through. And JDU is not a place of perfect believers who have it all together. It's a place of people who know they don't have it all together, know they need community, know they need wisdom on how to have a healthy relationship. And that's honestly what it's all about. So I'm just grateful that you feel like it was that impactful for you as well.
Yeah. No, we're grateful for you and Pauline, man. We love y'all.
So one more time, justdatinguniversity.com. You can go there to learn more information if you're interested. We got one more question. Somebody actually just submitted, and then we'll get out of here. So y'all can answer. Somebody said, is it common for a man to identify a potential wife within a few weeks of getting to know her?
I think, we prophesy in part, right? So it's like I can see someone, if I know what I'm looking for, it's like, oh yeah, they got this, they got this, they got this. And obviously it's going to take more than a few weeks to really get to know that person. So I'm not about to propose, but I very well may have the feeling like, oh, like I think this person is, I think they're the one for me. And that very well be the case. So I think it's really more so a matter of like, okay, like this is a green flag, let me keep going, versus like, oh, I need to lock it down right now, like a Hallmark movie or something.
Yeah, that's good. Zach?
Yeah, I would say that it, like Matt said, it takes time, right? I mean, I think you can see the potential for sure, right? Like you could see the core, like good person, great looking, whatever, all that, and that's good. But I mean, you got to be able to make sure you can build a life and a family with this person. And so it takes a lot more than time. But yes, ultimately you can see the potential, but you need to be praying about it and be fasting about it and be talking to them about it. And I for me personally, like growing in friendship is huge, right? Like I think really the biggest reason we were able to succeed as well as we did is because we trusted each other long before we were together, because we were friends. But man, I think that if you really see potential in it, man, just submit it to God and God will work the rest out.
Yeah, absolutely. Take it in prayer. And I'll say this, and then we'll close. Dating is about evaluation. So you can have an idea, like they both said, hey, this person looks like they would be everything and more and a wife for me. But now they need to confirm that over and over and over. You need to see, how do they talk to the waiter? You need to see, how do they talk to their friends when they have a disagreement? You need to see, how do they honor their parents? There's so many things you need to see to confirm that what you feel is correct, because you ain't trying to get married off a feeling. You need to get married off of, for sure that you've seen fruit in this person's life. And that only comes through time and evaluation, and truly evaluating and truly asking questions to get to know your partner better, not just staring in their eyes and all that relationship rom-com stuff. So that stuff is cool, but you need that, and you need to be seriously evaluating.
Yeah, that's good.
Yo, this was great. Like, I think y'all gave even more than I thought we would go tonight. I think the people in the comments are saying that it's been great as well. Hopefully the men were blessed, because we really were trying to come for y'all tonight and show you what it looks like to be a godly man, what it looks like to not be perfect, but to do your best to pursue all that God has for you. And hopefully for the ladies, because we see y'all snuck in here, hopefully you realize what should I be looking for in a godly man? Like, what are some things that godly men do? So hopefully that was helpful. I just want to thank you, Zach. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate you both. I honor you both. I think you guys are both great men, and you're continuing to pursue God. So y'all have a good night, and hopefully we'll see you in Just Date University. See y'all.